Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. I've got my headphones up turned up too high, so I just blasted myself.
Sorry.
Well, that's not your fault. How are you?
I am good. I'm good. Yeah. It's been a while. I mean, it's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you as well. It's been 6 years.
That's crazy. How was your pandemic?
Beautiful. How was yours?
Was it? It was kind of not quite so beautiful, but
Yeah,
that's
I can
okay.
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. 6 years, that's crazy.
Isn't it? Yeah. It was, oh well, I looked at the date. I think it was 2017.
I didn't realize it had been that long. So I had a newborn baby, I guess.
Yeah. Uh yes, I think it was yeah. Yeah, yeah.
That's wild. Well, I'm happy to be back.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I re-listened to our conversation just to remind myself what we'd asked, what we talked about, and what we'd covered, because I didn't want to just go through the same thing again. Didn't want to ask you all the
Yeah,
same questions again. And
yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
it's funny. Um, I don't do that often. I don't listen back to old episodes, so it's very interesting to listen to kind of where you were at 6 years ago. It's not where you were at, where I was at, because I can remember where I
Yeah,
was. I can remember the whole thing.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, myself too. I feel like I'm like 100% a different person now than I was then. And that's a pretty wild thing to feel. I don't feel like there's many periods in my life where I've changed as much as I have in the last probably 5 years.
Wow.
So
Yeah, we're coming up on. If it was 7 years, we'd have totally new bodies. All the cells in our bodies would have
really,
changed.
oh my gosh, I love that. We would be completely reinvented.
That's wild, isn't
That is, yeah. I didn't realize that 7 years. That seems dramatic, right? Like that's a pretty quick turnover.
it? Well, some things turn over really fast. Like I think your liver is completely all new cells every 40 days, I want to say. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? But I think it is. Some things turn over much faster than others. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think your whole body, it takes 7 years and it's all new cells.
that's wild. I did not know that.
Yeah, well, check with your husband. He would know more than me, but I'm pretty sure. I don't know. Do they teach you that sort of thing in medical school? Probably not, because
No, I'm sure they do. I'm sure.
that's it. That's interesting, dinner party conversation. That's not the sort of thing they'd be teaching you in medical school.
Yeah, for sure. That's probably the kind of thing he gets asked a lot, though. Those kind of questions, I mean.
I am sure. So we had some questions come in from social media. Mitch Griffiths, former podcast guest, fantastic painter, episode 108 and 169, if you're looking for them,
Yeah.
asks, "Where the heck have you been?" And then Tracy Gardner on Instagram says, "Yes, where the heck have you been? Missing seeing your paintings and your cute kids in brackets." So, Rachel, where the heck have you been?
Yeah. So it's been kind of an interesting, and I think that the turning point for me was kind of right when the pandemic happened, and there was this initial, so I had a show um slotted for the fall of 2020 with RJD Gallery, and that got completely shut down. And I think, like anybody, and especially anybody with kids, the beginning of the pandemic was just kind of a whirlwind of like figuring out life, and it was distracting and all of that. But then this really interesting thing happened for me for the first time in my career, which I also imagine a lot of artists can relate to. And I know, I've spoken to some, um, where I began to question the importance of what I was doing and I think it was hard when galleries shut down, when the world shut down, and to see and to feel um, how art was seemingly the least important thing that you could be doing then. And I know that that's, arguable. And of course, we need, beauty and creativity and all of that in the world. But it really threw me into a pretty dramatic and deep depression, and one that I think that I've never really experienced in my life. I've had, days where I've been sad, but not periods where I've questioned kind of my identity and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And so it was that for a good 6 months. I think I didn't paint or do anything at all. And then I started getting some commissions, which was surprising to me, because I started my career, I think like any struggling artist, doing a lot of commissions, a lot of commissions. And then when I started selling paintings of my own, I stopped doing commission. I was tired of doing work for other people, and I just wanted to paint my own stuff and my own vision. So it had been, probably 8 years since I had done a commission. And I started getting some, which really became kind of a nice lifeline for me during the pandemic. It was like kind of it took the pressure off to have to come up with something that I wanted to paint on my own, to paint, for other people. Um, and I got to do some pretty big projects, some pretty fun projects, which I'll tell you a little bit about. I got to do maybe the greatest commission ever, but and so that was really enjoyable. But then I was stuck, and I was stuck as an artist for the first time, I think, in my career. And so I realized that what I needed to do was give myself time and space to experiment and to try to develop myself as an artist. And I realized that it was a really good opportunity to kind of sit in the sadness and pull myself out of it with art, in a way that felt like moving forward, I guess. And that felt like an opportunity. I thought, when is there ever going to be a time that's as still as the time that we were in, when we were in our houses? And when am I ever going to be able to be this quiet, this turned into myself, and have this opportunity again? And so I started experimenting. I started painting differently. I started making bad paintings, and paintings with no intention, and really treating it as a time of growth. And it felt, aimless and painful at times, and really challenging, but it finally turned into something, and that's what's been happening. And I think what happened initially was that I was depressed, and then I was pulling myself out of it, and I was doing all this experimentation that I didn't want to do in front of the world, just because I'm actually I think people tend to think that I'm an extrovert, because I'm friendly and I'm outgoing, and I like, human interaction and stuff like that. But I'm kind of a deeply introverted and private person. And so I think that was just something that felt really good to me. And then it just kind of kept rolling. It was like, well, I'm making, these paintings. I also didn't really know what my next step was. And I wanted to kind of give myself some space to struggle with that. I've been represented by RJD Gallery. And Richard is, I mean, hands down, one of the best human beings that I've ever met. And I feel so lucky to have started my career with him, and to have him as a constant kind of mentor and family member. He has really nurtured me. And having heard a lot of my friends' experiences with galleries and gallery relationships and being fucked over, like, he truly cares more about the people than the art, and that's super rare. And we have a very close relationship, and I'll always, be connected with him and be part of that gallery. But feeling in this place like I'm needing to branch out of myself and do something big and do something next. He, mid-pandemic, had moved the gallery to Romeo, Michigan, which is where his wife lives, and they have a baby. And so that's,
Yep.
the right, like, life move for him. But that's a big shift and a big change as well. And I'm ready for, oh, I'm sorry. We have a really, I have a very senile and disgruntled dog. Come here, come here. Stop. Sorry. um, Actually, can I calm him down real quick and then I'll give
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Sorry to pause it. No, you need to.
Just while we're waiting, Richard's wife that Rachel was referencing is Andrea Couch, who was on the podcast many years ago as well. I haven't got the
Yeah.
number to hand, but if you search for Andrea Couch on the website, you'll find her.
Yes. Yeah. So anyways, we had some talks about me potentially doing some other things, trying some new things, branching out. And I still don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I think I'm in general just ready for the next move. So the last few years, and especially during the pandemic, was giving myself kind of time to do that and make new work privately. And it has finally developed into something which I'm really excited about. And so I think that that's what's coming up, is just kind of coming back out into the world, showing the new work that I've created, and hoping that it is as well received as I hope it can be. But I learned a lot in the last 3 years. And I think that one of the biggest things that I got out of the experience was realizing that it wasn't just the pandemic and this feeling and this depression that I had experienced for the first time. I think that I realized that I had gotten a little bit complacent in my art practice. And I had, we with RJD Gallery, we had this, I was just a kind of a well-oiled machine. It was like, I knew what would sell of my work. I knew what people wanted. And it was make the painting, finish the painting, send it to the gallery, sell the painting, make the painting, finish the painting, and so it was just this kind of process of doing what I knew I could do well. And the times when I've been happiest as an artist are truly like when you don't know what's next, and the hustle, and figuring out and finding that you can reinvent yourself or improve your craft and rise to levels that you didn't really know that you were capable of. So that's my hope. And I also kind of reframed it for myself, where I am assuming that, I've been working professionally as an artist for, well, now about 13 years. So I'm assuming that every decade or so, I'm going to have to do this, kind of have to force myself into the next place, the new version of myself, in order to grow and develop as an artist. So,
Yeah, yeah. So, what is, if you can describe, what is different about your work now?
well, okay. So I think that it's great that, I've done your podcast before, because I feel like a lot, my work has always been kind of autobiographical. And I think that, I've used other women to kind of tell my own story through them as subjects. And it's always been about relationships and sexuality, and my place in the world, and uh seeing the world with humor, and all of that. But so this new work is kind of all about my relationship to men. And it's all male subjects. And so that's a big change for me because I feel like the thing that I'm probably known for is painting uh, women and
Yeah.
female subjects. And so, and I would say that these are in the same vein, you know, they're, I'm using men that I know that are from different periods or experiences in my life that represent chapters and my relationship to men and I don't know, just kind of I feel like I have a lot more to say now that I'm middle age. I officially turned middle aged in the during the pandemic. So I think that's what 35. I'm here. I'm 37.
No, I don't think so. But okay. If
That's when they say it starts. No, that is. Because I was shocked too. I was like, no way, I'm still young. Middle aged is 50, but middle aged is officially 35.
yeah, well, I'm still looking forward to my midlife crisis.
Yeah, totally. um, but anyways, it was, I feel like finally, have and I know that I am still young in the scheme of things and have a lot more to learn. And I'm sure that my experience and relationship with people in general, but also especially men, will continue to change. But I just feel like I have a grasp, kind of a hindsight 2020 view of experience and my own experience in relationship to men. And I've always, I spent a lot of time not painting and looking at art and looking at other artists and appreciate, really just appreciating art in the pandemic during the pandemic. And one of the things that I have seen and have always seen is these just like male artists, like honoring, objectifying, depicting women in with in relation to them in this, it's this beautiful or objectified or whatever view of these women that says more about the men than it does about the women in the paintings oftentimes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do that for myself. I wanted to paint men in the same way. I wanted to objectify them. I wanted to honor them. I wanted to make them vulnerable. And kind of paint a depiction and a celebration of that vulnerability in kind of a silly way and in a way that I, respond to and relate to, kind of, which has always been kind of with like camp and humor. Um, and so I have been painting life-size sexy cowboys is what I've been doing. So the paintings are huge. They're each one is kind of a character that I've assigned them and then let them run with. The subjects that I chose they're very specific men in my life from very specific periods that represent kind of chapters of my life. And they're all kind of these magnetic figures. Like, have you ever met somebody where just everybody is attracted to them, whether it's like, a male or a female, or it doesn't really matter. It's just that person is just attractive to everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So
where
that's,
when I first heard about the word charisma, it was in relation to somebody like that. The very
yeah.
first time somebody said, "Oh yeah, he's got a lot of charisma." I was like, "What's that?" And they explained it
Yeah.
to me. It's like, "Oh yeah, that would have been a teenager then, you know."
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's who I used for this, is men from different periods of my life who just have that and just people are drawn to them. And then I, asked them to play with me or perform for me or take their clothes off for me. And it was kind of a lot of fun, and it's been great. But I'm painting looser. I'm painting, with visible brush strokes and sometimes frosting thick, which has been just a delight, kind of changing, mixing that up. And it's kind of changing my relationship with paint. You know, the paintings that I'm making now, I feel like are more about the material and using the paint than they are about technique and being a really well polished technician and being able to represent something kind of, you know, shockingly realistically or tight, you know. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so it's been it's been that, but it's the next chapter. There's nothing that's really different, but you know, like for me it's a clear evolution, but it is definitely a departure from what I've been doing. You know, I think, and I think that's intentional. I've always done kind of small, tight, well rendered paintings, and these are big, loose, and a lot more expressive. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, yeah, and it's
Okay.
scary. You know, I don't know if anybody is interested in buying a painting of like a life-size painting of a naked cowboy. That's, you know, I don't know that yet. So, but we'll see. But I had to make it,
Yeah,
you know.
I think there are. I
I
think you're
hope
safe.
so.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think you're. I don't think you'll have any trouble selling them.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Are
Okay.
you? Is Richard going to sell them for you, or have you changed galleries or anything?
So I haven't changed galleries. I am still making some of the same, you know. It's, and Richard and I have talked about kind of what's next and stuff for the gallery. I think it's going to be additive. I don't think I'm going to stop showing with RJD, but I think I am going to try to branch out. I don't think these paintings that I'm making are maybe even necessarily the right fit for that gallery.
I was just going
They're
to say, yeah,
very, very contemporary. And so I
yeah,
think that I think he knows that too. But yeah, so we'll see what happens, but I don't think these big ones are going to go to him. I also don't necessarily want to ship them to Michigan. So
yeah. And do you have enough of them for a show?
not yet, but I will. And I think that that's the next, right? Like it's really, I think that was kind of the goal, was creating enough of a little body of work to say this is what's next, and then to kind of put it out there in the world and see what happens.
Yeah,
And it
yeah. It
feels like the right
sounds like it would
time.
make for a great show.
Yeah, I mean that would be my hope, and I would need a space with some pretty big walls, but it would be, yeah, I would love it. I would love to make it a show. I think that it would be very cool and exciting. I'm excited about it. To me, this feels like the most sincere and the best work that I've ever made, and so I am, yeah, I'm excited to kind of come out with it, but it's been good. You know, it's funny too, this disappearing from social media thing, because it's not natural to me to just like post all the time and let people in on my daily practice. And I think a lot of people feel that way, but then you really do recognize that, like especially Instagram, and I'm sure TikTok, I don't do TikTok, but I'm sure all of that stuff is very you know, it's a free marketing tool. It's only there to benefit artists, and it's, you're kind of a fool if you don't use it. And I get that, but it definitely feels good to take a step back and to disappear a little bit. And nice to be able to explain myself in a way like this rather than, you know, on Instagram, which feels kind of weird to me. So this felt like
Yeah,
a really nice time to do that.
yeah. Well, Instagram's changed a lot in the last couple of years. It's not what it was in terms of exposure.
So I
And
don't use it enough, but how do you feel about, like, I hear that all the time. How do you feel like it's changed?
um, it's sort of swung much more towards videos. So everyone's having to make reels
Oh yeah.
if they want to, you know, it's no more, it's not a case you can just post static shots anymore. You can, but nothing happens with them. And
Yeah.
you, regardless of how many followers you have now, the number of people that see what you post is substantially reduced. So it's kind of swung in favor of people who advertise with them. They get more
Oh.
push. So it's kind of even the people who follow you don't even get to see you that much, get to see what you do that much. So yeah, nothing but disgruntlement from people about Instagram in terms of what it was. It's kind of become more of a business card than a growth kind of thing. Meaning,
Hmm.
you know, when if somebody finds you or discovers you and they go to your Instagram, it's got to look right. It's got to look like it's been kept up, and they can kind of go through your work easily, which is kind of similar to your website in a way. But it's just it seems like it's much more like that now than what it used to be. Where people were
Yeah.
discovering artists all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah. I think that I got yeah, that's too bad. I think that I guess it is. Now, like if I think about it, it is kind of hard to find like new work. I guess it has to do with like what you scroll through and then what it like offers to you. Is that still a thing or no?
It is, but it's almost like it's hyper responsive. So, for example, if you where it sort of shows you this, I can't remember the name of that page where it's like it shows you other accounts that are not yours, and
Right.
whatever you click on, it will show you more of that. So if you happen to see if you're mostly interested in art on Instagram, but you happen to see someone's apartment with a potted plant and you clicked on that, then suddenly
Oh,
you're starting to
it's
see a lot
nothing but
more
potted
potted
plants.
plants, and then you have to kind of almost train it to go back to art. So that's a bit annoying.
Yeah, that's
And then
frustrating.
and what it will do is it will infest your page at that particular page with everyone who's paid to be on that page. So you'll see all sorts of celebrity stuff and influencer stuff. They don't say they're paid, but you can kind of tell by the sort of vibe of the account that they've paid somewhere to be on your page.
Yeah. Yeah, that's frustrating. I guess it also kind of like skews your sense of reality too, because where you might see like, one picture of a potted plant or something like that, then if it's all you're getting, you think that that's like all the content that exists in the world, right? Like that's
Yeah, and you think everyone's potted plants are better than yours.
yeah. Oh, that's awful.
Everyone's so much better at that potted plant thing than me.
I
um,
it's nice to take a back seat though and not worry about like the likes and the feedback that you get from Instagram because you then get to, at least in my experience the last couple of years, just really appreciate what you're seeing, and kind of
yeah,
use it in that way and not be so caught up with it. I don't know, but it's also it's important to as an artist, especially when you're learning and growing, to have feedback. And I haven't had that for a couple of years, and it definitely can make you second guess yourself, and it can stall you out. I definitely know that I have a lot of finished work right now, and like I should have been showing it probably a couple months ago, and I'm just like it might be more fear-based than anything that I'm just sitting on it and waiting.
yeah. Well, you can use the stories. Stories are good like that because they disappear after 24 hours.
Totally. So you can kind of test it out that way. You're like, what do you
Yeah,
guys think? Is this shitty? And then if it is, then you just pretend it never existed.
yeah. Just automatically disappears. It's great. Um, so when we were last talking, you were just kind of coming into a real focus on the transition stage between being a child and being an adult.
Yeah.
Uh, and as you say, mostly women. Was there did you just stop dead with that and then go to the men, or did you start off with men at that age? Or I'm just wondering what how you got from one to the other.
Yeah, so I think that this is the next transition. You know, I think that like, I don't know, I've never felt more like an adult or more like a grown-ass woman than I have in the last couple of years. Seriously, like it's just and that comes with a lot of things. It comes with being comfortable saying no. It comes with really knowing yourself and um what you're capable of, what you're comfortable with. If you're it comes with accepting change. It comes with having to sort things out on your own and not having the help of a parent or a guide or even necessarily a community in some senses, you know, like especially when we're all quarantined and isolated and having to kind of build that for yourself. And I think that um, a lot of the social comforts that I required when I was younger, a lot of the outside validation, I now get from myself, you know, and I feel a lot more self-possessed and capable than I ever did before. And so I think that this is simply the next transition. Like I don't think I'm there yet. I think I still have a lot to learn, but I think a lot of my life and a lot of my artwork has always been about kind of, yeah, telling the story, feeling in between, creating this narrative of not quite feeling like I've got it all together, but I'm getting there, and that it has always been depicted in there. And finding a place in the world as a woman, always a theme, I think, for most women in their lives. just like, how do I fit in? What is this experience? Like, what just happened to me? Was that okay with me? There's so much of that and this is just kind of the next phase of that. But I'm in a little bit of a different place. I feel a little bit more um, aware. I don't know. That sounds so cheesy, but I know myself a lot better that now than I did before. I'm a lot less willing to compromise uh, and do things to please other people. And I think that a lot of that came out through this process of figuring out, like, who am I painting for? What am I painting for? Is it for other people? Is it to sell a painting that I know that people will buy, that they like, that they want from me and expect from me? Or is it painting what I really fucking want to paint and, telling my own story, whether it's palatable or not, you know?
Yeah,
And we all have to make those decisions, right? I mean, I'm sure. Does do you feel that in your own work too? That it's do you feel like you paint for yourself, or do you feel like you paint for other people, or
totally
a
for
mix?
myself.
Really?
Yep.
Has it always been easy to do that?
Um, I think initially I wanted to see if I could do it, meaning I wanted to see if I could actually technically do what I wanted to do. So I think indirectly that was an externally focused thing, even though it was just between me and me. So sort of were other people involved, but then once I kind of did most of the things that I wasn't sure that I could do technically, um, then yeah, it was all for me. Really, it was all just whatever I wanted to paint.
Yeah. I mean, I admire that a lot. I think that's where I got, you know, once you turn it into a business, I think that there's some of that you lose a little bit.
Yeah,
And and I struggle with that a lot. And I think it's because I've been an artist my whole life. It's something that I've done since I was a child, and it's been the piece of me that like really has um felt the most sincere, the most honest, and the most like me. And I think that in turning art into a business, knowing that you have to make a living, uh, getting a little addicted to succeeding at it, you can lose a little bit of that, I think.
Yeah.
One of the things, it's funny because like one of the uh, artists that I felt most connected to during this like time of the great time of isolation for me was Henry Darger. Do you know his work?
No.
So Henry Darger was I first saw his work at the Folk Art Museum in New York, probably in 2001 when I was a teenager. I went on a trip with my mom and we went to this show, and he was born in like the late 1800s and he died in the 1970s, and he was a custodian at a like a hospital in Chicago. And when he died, they found 15 volumes of this rant graphic novel uh, poetry writing that was 15,000 pages long, called In the Realms of the Unreal. And it has a much longer title too, like and it's so wild. But
Yeah, that's ringing
and
a
with
bell.
it, yeah, totally. And with it was just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of illustrations that and they were, some of them are gruesome, some of them are little girls with penises with guns fighting soldiers. Like it's wild. But and it was like and that's what he got famous after his death for this like incredible body of work that he had, that was like he's kind of this like celebrated American folk artist now, and so. But when I saw the show when I was a teenager, I had this like great sense of kinship with him, where it was like art for me has always been that. It's been therapeutic. It's been a way to tell my story in the way that feels like I want to tell it, right? Like that feels the most sincere to me, whether that's based in reality, whether that's based on fantasies that I have, or the way that I wish my life was, or the way that I, want to feel, or whatever it is. It's a graphic novel of my life. And this like this retelling, or this visual capture of my own experiences, and I connected really greatly to that. And I loved that he spent his whole life making this body of work for himself. We didn't see it. We had no access to it until after he was dead. And to have like to do something that obsessively and that completely, that it's 15,000 pages and
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of beautiful, incredible, obsessive illustrations. Like um you can say what you want. I think people really like to be like, oh, he was probably mentally ill or whatever, but like that's
No,
it's
there's quite a few examples of people like that. Like there's that photographer woman who, again, all her fantastic photographs. She was in the 50s. Can't remember her name right now. And it only came to light after she died, that she had all these wonderful black and white candid photographs.
yeah.
There's another guy in, I want to say, Poland, who had all these incredible concrete sculptures in his garden. People. So he had like a property, let's say, 4 or 5 acre property, and it's just full of all these people that he made out of concrete.
Yeah.
Nobody knew about them until after he died. Now it's a thing you can go and visit.
But amazing, right? And like and I feel like we're all these like inside of ourselves, we're these like isolated weirdos that feel, misunderstood, and we live our lives just hoping to be seen for exactly who we are, and appreciated for it. And I think that like to have an outlet for that weirdness in yourself is
Yeah.
like that's a true gift, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like that very chilling, or it doesn't sound chilling. It sounds lovely, but I find it chilling. It's like that idea of don't die with the music in you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there's something about that, isn't there?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And to leave behind a legacy of your weirdness is just that's such a delight. And so that's become truly important to me. It's just like painting what's really important to me, whether it's marketable or not, and just like trusting, pursuing, and dedicating myself to um, kind of forcing it into the world and letting it be noted and recognized and you know
Do,
for for its authenticity, not because it's marketable or I know that people will buy it, you know.
yeah. Do you think the being noticed and recognized thing is that important? Like, I often think that artists who make things, whether that's sculpture, paintings, or even writing, something like that, they're kind of it's a real trap that you can get caught up on the product, whereas people like singers or theater actors or people who are engaged in very ephemeral kind of art that just you've got to be there or you're going to miss it kind of thing. It'll just disappear.
Yeah.
I often think that they are much more in tune with what is really important in it, and it's the act of getting it out, whether anyone hears it or sees it or is a bonus. It's lovely, but
Yeah.
it's actually, I think. What do you think? I think it seems to be. It's actually the process of doing it
Yes.
that's where the real joy is.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, no, but I think it's the same with visual art, and I think it's the process of enjoying doing it. I think that's the piece that was lost for me was like, what is the enjoyment of creating this product? Is it because I'm making something that I know somebody will buy? Like that, it lost the passion piece for me. It
Yeah,
lost the intention and how and like right now sitting in my studio and spending time in my studio painting is like it's a day well spent. It's a life well lived, is just being in there, you know,
yeah,
and you know, agonizing over am I going to be able to, you know, make a living off of this is part of it. But it's it feels better to do that, and I think that that's the I think it's important to recenter because, you know, who knows what happens, but if this goes well, if I, you know, if things, you know, I had a very stable art career. Like it was very like it was completely manageable, and it was even predictable financially, which is, you know, that's such a gift, and it's a place where I think a lot of people strive just to be as artists. And let's say I get there again with this new work, then I'm gonna have to shake it up for myself to keep telling the story that's authentic to me in the future.
yeah,
And now I know that, you know, now I know that every decade or so I'm gonna have to do something for myself and uh, have a period of turmoil and emotional growth, I guess. So,
yeah, yeah. I suspect that it's linked to your inner growth. So it may not be every 10 years.
oh,
It may speed
yeah,
up as you get older.
yeah, yes. No, I think you're very right. Yeah, I think right. That's true too. It's also, you know, we become so obsessed with what we're doing, and I think that being a professional artist and being successful at it is just such a time-consuming thing that you kind of lose sight of everything else around you. And you know, to be able to appreciate life and to be able to be like, oh my gosh, there's, you know, passion and joy and love and pain and, you know, all the things outside of art that, you know, I internalize and experience privately and in my studio. But like having those experiences in the real world is an equal gift, and it's important to find the balance between being so isolated and compulsive and, you know, having to create the fantasy version of that through your work and actually experiencing it and living it, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, God, I'm really enjoying this podcast. I've listened to a few now and they're brilliant. And there's so many of them. And I've learned so much from listening to them. And you know what? If I met that John Dalton fella in real life, I'd love to buy him a cup of tea and have a chat with him. I'd love to do that every month if I could. Well, now you can. The tea part at least, because this podcast runs on cups of tea bought for me by people like you who listen to the podcast and send me the price of a cup of tea once a month through the Patreon account. That's patreon.com/John Dalton Gently Does It. All one word. And if you're one of those people who already send me cups of tea through Patreon, thanks a million. The tea is lovely and I really appreciate it. Now, the great thing is that if you can't afford to send me the price of a cup of tea or you don't want to, that's fine. You still get exactly the same podcast for free. It's sort of an honor system where the people who can afford it and want to pay for the people who can't or don't want to. So it's all lovely. So if you'd like to send me a cup of tea once a month, you can do that through Patreon. I'd really appreciate it. It makes a huge difference to me. I don't know if you heard my chat with Aaliyah Chapin, but she had, her story, particularly during the lockdowns, is very similar. She made a very drastic pivot and it worked out really well for her.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, her paintings have changed dramatically.
They have, and she now when I talked to her, it had she had shown the work and it was very well received. So she kind of got through to the other side, but she was saying that before she showed it, she was just as concerned as you are. So
yeah,
it's very it'll be encouraging for you if you haven't heard it. I think I saw one of the Cowboys on your Instagram. Was that one of the earlier ones, was it?
Yeah, so that was kind of the beginning of this. It was right before, or right when the pandemic happened. It was like, that was like kind of it was like, oh, this is a new direction. And then they've just gotten kind of buck wild from there. They're like,
is that the name of one of the Cowboys?
looser and thicker and more ridiculous and more naked and yeah, so they're great. I love them and I'm just surrounded by them in my studio. It makes me really happy all day long to have this just like
that's a good sign.
Vulnerable male presence all around me.
Lovely. So did you stay with panels or did you switch to canvas with the size, or did you go to aluminium?
So I did 2 of them on canvas, just straight up canvas. And it was really fun to to stretch canvas again, which I hadn't done since I was in grad school. Was so satisfying. And there's 2 that are 3 by 5 feet and the figures on them are life-sized. So and they're those are just on stretched canvas. And then other than that, I'm working on wood panel. So
okay,
kind of going back and forth between the 2. Yeah. I don't know if I like canvas. I still it was great for these experiments and the paint is so thick on them but I feel like I could probably do the same thing on wood. I think I was worried about the weight and then I was I don't know. I don't exactly know why. I think it was also just kind of doing everything that I don't do, right?
Yeah.
Like, I paint on wood, I paint on panel. And so I was like, let's do canvas and let's, see how thick we can make this paint and only use big brushes and all of that stuff. And so I think that it was, that was part of it too, but I don't know. I thought that, the first one was such a learning experience. And then the second one is, I'm still working on that one now, but that one was like very, it's going better and it's quicker, but so I learned a lot from the first one, but I still don't know if I'm crazy about canvas. What do you paint on?
Wooden panels, little wooden panels, 1 foot by 1 foot at the moment. Small. Yeah. I like to think it's so I can get them in a headlock rather than them have me in headlock.
Yeah, but you've done some large work.
Yeah, mostly it was large up to that, but but I switched up the way I was working.
So now it's like that's intentional that they're all 12 by 12.
Yeah. I like the sculpturalness of it, and I like that I can beat them up.
What are you working on? What are you painting?
I've switched over to, I was painting. I'd sort of have very clear vision in my head of what I was going to paint, and then it's just a process of getting it out of my head onto the canvas. And then just from talking to all the different artists, something started to change in me, and I'll start off with a reference photo, but I'm more interested in why did I take the photo? What was it aesthetically that made me want to take that photo? It's usually some random, leaf, bit of fungus, some natural thing or some just something that catches my eye. So I'm just kind of curious about what was it that caught my eye. So that's the kind of start. And initially I start automatically just representing. So I just start, I don't mean to, but that's the way I start. And then I kind of get out of the way as much as possible, and it just turns into other things. And
Hmm.
I used to listen to music when I would work. Now it's all dead quiet because I'm so listening to what's going on inside me.
Wow.
And yeah, and then at some point it'll just go, I'm finished, put the brush down kind of thing. And it doesn't happen in one session. And then I kind of stand back and I'm like, what's that all about, and sometimes it'll even have its name, it'll be, I'm finished and this is the name kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's a real process of exploration now, rather than knowing what's going to happen.
Are they for public consumption, or are we going to find a Henry Darger stash of secret
No,
artwork?
once they're finished, I'll put them up. I put them
Yeah.
on Instagram, and they're finished. But there's a few, quite a few that are not finished. They just
Yeah.
kind of hang around, and I'll do another kind of session on them and not get anywhere, and or it'll change, but I know it's not finished.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with the transition to this work, like I know this, when we last spoke, I didn't even know about the male gaze, right? Since found out about it, and then reviewed and re-looked at all my older work and was like, oh god, just automatically did a lot of that stuff.
Well, same.
So yeah, okay. So do you think, well, for the work that you're doing now, is there, like, I have a feeling that there isn't a female gaze, but I don't know, I'm not a woman, so I don't know. And so is there, I'm asking you, do you think there is a female gaze? And are the new paintings, are you expressing that in those paintings, or is it a different thing?
So I think I mean, there's definitely a female gaze because we're women and we have points of view. So anything that we put out there is technically the female gaze, right? But I think that
Well, hang on a sec.
yeah,
I'm not so, that's why my question is, right? Like you you could say that about men and women, right? Men see things one way, women see things another way. But
sure.
my understanding of the male gaze is that I suppose it's linked to a very patriarchal society, but it was like it sort of invades everything. It's like
Yeah.
it imposes itself, and in a way, it sort of tries to make everyone in the world see the world in the way that men see the world.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying I don't think women do that. I think
I
women, paint things like, just from talking to female painters, and
yeah.
they paint, and it's like, okay, so that's the way that person sees the world, but there's not that quality of trying to cover the whole world with it. Like that's why like when I think about the male gaze, it's got that dimension of invading reality, wherever it goes. So that's what I mean about, is there a I don't is there a woman equivalent of that?
I mean, I think I would like my work to be powerful enough to invade reality for people and to have that same power where that's how it's, accepted and received. So I mean, I understand what you're saying that there's like this, I think there's a response to it, right? Like I think that women in this way feel from my perspective, it does seem like women tend to paint themselves as the response rather than men, right? Like I feel
Yeah.
like women have been the subject of both for so long, and it's this call and response where men are painting these like sexy, beautiful, naked women. This is not to generalize all men. I'm just saying, like, we see that we've seen this through time. We've
Yeah.
seen just like gorgeous, you know, and women have beautiful bodies that should be celebrated. I get it. Like I deeply understand that, especially when we're talking about aesthetics. Like it doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be inclusive. It can be from a single point of view. Like and it's important that we get everything through art. You know, we can't filter it because it's not politically correct. Like we should see misogyny through art. We should see the male gaze and then have a conversation about it. We should see all of that stuff. But I do feel like women tend to respond with themselves. So they paint real bodies, they paint powerful women, they paint, you know, they take control of the narrative and they put that out there fully clothed or as they are or as they feel or larger than life or whatever you want to say. And what I see less is a feminist perspective of a celebration of men. So I think that's like where I would like to come from, you know. I
Yeah.
I think that it's and I because I don't think men are bad. I don't think that men are wrong. I don't, you know, I don't think men are the enemy by any means. And um, from a personal point of view, like my relationship with men and my own, you know, relationship with myself in regards to men, the experiences I've had, my sexuality, all of that stuff, like we're deeply intertwined. That's how it is. And so it feels relevant to me, but I also like the idea of um it's not even taking their power away, it's empowering them in a different way in these paintings and showing them that like men are beautiful, men are strong, men are vulnerable and weak, men are uh, sexy and silly and all of those things. And this is and it feels really powerful for me to be able to discuss my own experience by objectifying them a little bit, which I don't know if that's maybe not not the right thing to do or say, but like that feels good. It feels good to me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's more. It doesn't it come down to like what's authentic. Like if you find yourself objectifying men just generally, like automatically, then it makes sense to paint that. Um,
Sure.
you know.
And I mean, I absolutely do. I love men. So, um, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's me. But
Yeah.
yeah. So but I think that's where it's unique. I think that the female gaze tends to be the call and response to the male gaze, which, you know, those that it tends to be a response. Women are just saying, you know, that we get overwhelmed by this kind of way of things running and
Yeah.
say like this is not fucking okay. Like either all we want is equality or to be heard or appreciated in the same way as men. And so the response comes from that because it's, you know, it's finally saying this is not okay. But this feels yeah, I think a little bit different from that, just in that it's using men as the subjects instead of changing the perspective on women as the subject.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I had a very interesting experience last year. Alessandro Tomasetti, I don't know if you know his paintings.
Oh yes, yeah, he's amazing. He
He,
gave a couple of my students some scholarships too, which was like incredible. Yeah, he's
oh,
great.
lovely.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, as you know, then all his paintings are of men,
yeah.
and he was putting together a book of his photographs, which are all on Polaroid, and he very kindly asked me if I would write the foreword. And you know, I'm, as I said, got my male gaze. I'm a heterosexual man, so I was found myself in this kind of position of looking at all these photographs of these men who have all these characteristics that you're talking about, and feeling very uncomfortable and very this is me feeling very uncomfortable and
Yeah.
very um, it really pushed me to begin to see what Alessandro was seeing, to
Yes.
sort of get out of my own way and to kind of just see what he was seeing. And so when you're talking about what you're talking about, if we'd been having this conversation the year beforehand, I don't think I would have understood what you mean in the way that I do, because by the end of it, I could really see the beauty that he was talking about, see the vulnerability that you're talking about, the strength, the weakness, the strain that actually is there for men, which I never really even thought about, that, for men to be a certain way, to present a
100%.
certain way,
Yes.
that I never even thought about. And of course, as soon as I saw it, it was a bit like the male gaze. It was like, oh yeah, God, I've got that as well, or I've had to deal with that. That you have to present a certain facade.
Well, especially
Just
straight heterosexual men, right?
yeah,
Like, or right. Yes, that's the same thing. But yeah, the right. But I'm right. So heterosexual men have this like these like social expectations of how they're supposed to be and feel about certain things in the world and the way that they're supposed to present. Is that kind of what you're
yeah. Well, I kind of knew about that, but just the kind of just on a very almost bodily kind of how you hold yourself kind of
Oh, yeah.
way,
Yeah.
um, sort of, I think it was on a more subtle level, maybe because I was just looking at surface images and kind of seeing it, and then also sort of seeing them through Alessandro's eyes. But yeah, it's great. I really want to see your paintings now, of course.
Yeah, I will. I will yeah, that's I need to photograph them. That's the next thing is kind of sorting out how to photograph such large work, which I haven't really done before. So
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. Wow, that all sounds brilliant. Let me get back to some questions. Oh yeah, when we were last talking, you were in Las Vegas, and you were like, "Got another 6 months here, or at the very
oh
minimum,
yeah.
whatever." I think it took you longer to get out of there though than you had thought, or am I right? Did it take you longer to get out of Las Vegas?
Yeah, so we were in Vegas for I think it's because I had a baby. I might have been pregnant with my daughter when we spoke. If it was 6 years ago, she's only 5.5. So that might have been what it was. But she so yeah, that was a whole, I mean, I'll tell you exactly what it was, but it was my so I had a C-section with my son, and my kids are only 17 months apart. And we were planning to move back to California, and she was going to be born in California, but I wanted to have a VBAC, a vaginal birth after cesarean. So this is a lot of information for your listeners. And they wouldn't do it in because I had a recent C-section. They wouldn't do
Oh
it
yeah,
in California. So we stayed an extra year so that she could be born with the doctor who was very in support of me having a VBAC in Las Vegas. And then we moved to California after that. And we were there for a couple of years. And um, we we moved in the middle of we moved in 2022. So that was another piece of it was of and kind of a great piece of the growth was kind of changing environments. But we came back to Nevada actually. So I'm in Reno now, which is about
Okay.
30 minutes from Lake Tahoe, which is it's beautiful up here. It's nice, you know, my um we're it's significantly cheaper than the Bay Area in California, which is great. And it's a little bit it's just easy living up here. It's really nice. It's a great place to raise kids. It's nice to be out of the bubble of the Bay Area. And you know, I'm probably as liberal as they come, but being in a place that kind of shows the real world to my kids and kind of both sides of the coin and exposes them to more is something that's really important to me and
Yeah.
you don't always get that in the Bay Area. And so that's really nice. But we're still very close to the Bay Area, which is great. All of my most important people are there. So I'm glad that I get to go back a lot, which I do a lot. So um, yeah, so it's, you know, it's nice to be here, but yeah, so that was kind of the path that we took to end up here.
Yeah. I had a feeling you'd moved a couple of times. All right.
Yeah.
Um, so other than getting looser and thicker,
Yeah.
what have you has any other things technically changed in the way that you work?
Um, that's a good question. I think in getting looser and thicker, I'm less reliant on reference, which is kind of interesting. It kind of sounds like what you're talking about, where you kind of start with a reference and then you just paint the shit out of it. And that feels great for me. Like it's so fun to just be like, all right, well, now I'm just going to trust myself that I can paint this, right? Rather than that's, and I realize that I've never really done that. Like, and maybe that's a little bit of my lack of confidence as a painter has always been like, well, if I have a great reference, I can do it and I can do it really well. And just, you know, relying on my technical ability to, but you know, we don't want to be copyists. That's not what we're aiming to do. And so, I think that just kind of starting with a reference and then letting it go and just being like, I'm just going to figure this out for myself. And I understand enough about light and form. You know, I've taught uh, foundations and painting and drawing for 13 years now, and so that gives you a pretty good sense of understanding of how things work and relying on yourself and your ability, my you know my the knowledge that I have inside of myself rather than relying on a strong reference. It's also great because I can use whatever, you know, it's not like, oh, that picture didn't turn out, I can't use it, you know, or I
Yes.
want to paint this from life really quickly, but the light is changing or something like that. It's just kind of like, that's fine now. And that's a really nice, it's kind of a nice way to be. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Nice.
yeah.
Um, so this is a new question that I have started asking people. I never asked you. How do you name your paintings?
Um, a lot like you, a lot of the times the name will just kind of come to me. Like while I'm working on it, I'm like, oh, this should be called that, right? Or sometimes there's something that's significant to me, like a phrase or a song lyric that comes up for me a lot, or a poem or a bit of writing or something like that. And I'll feel like I need to make a piece of art that's connected to it. So I'll
Oh,
do
okay.
that sometimes too. Yeah. So that sometimes the title is there first. And then I'm like, okay, this is, you know, something. Or if it's just like a time in my life or something like that, then I'll just pull something out of that time that's important to me that, you know, feels relevant.
Yeah.
And then I'll put it in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Your
How
titles
do
are
you
great.
so for you, is it the painting titles itself? And then if it doesn't or you don't know, you do you just leave it untitled?
No, titles itself.
Oh, cool. You know what
Yeah.
I never understood is people who are like, who ask people like survey, like, what should I call this painting?
Mm, yeah.
That for me, I'm like, oh, that's like asking somebody what you should name your child, right? Like,
But I think that comes from what you were talking about of this kind of trap of success where they're into just kind of, they're on the treadmill. It's hard enough to get the painting done, finished on time. Oh my God, now I've got to come up with a name, you know.
yeah,
Yeah, let me ask Twitter.
yeah. And it's also a nice way of engaging the public and having them feel like part of your process, which I suppose
Yeah.
is valuable, totally, for especially if you're trying to sell work, like through social media. And it's a lot of that engagement, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. I could see how
and
it would be a good way of seeing what people are getting from it, you know, whether they actually use any of the suggested names or not. But you know the way how interesting it is when people look at your paintings and then they start telling you all this stuff that you didn't put in there, but you're just like, oh, okay, fine, yeah, I'm not
yeah,
disagreeing with you, you know. So
yeah,
if asking people to name your paintings would you'd get that kind of information with the
yeah,
names they'd suggest. I'm
yeah,
guessing.
yeah.
Sophia Prato on Instagram says, "Hi, when do you decide that a painting is done? I've had friends ask me this, and sometimes I just don't know."
Oh, that's a really amazing question. Hi, Sophia. I think she's was one of my old students. So oh gosh, that's a really good question. I don't know. I don't feel like any of my paintings are really ever done. I feel like I could keep going and going and going. At some point I do feel like I'm spinning my wheels a little bit. And then I stop. And usually there's a grace period of about a month where I think that I'm finished with a painting and then I just put it up in my studio and stare at it. And oftentimes I'll come back and noodle at it for another week or so, or add something, or I'll be like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to do this, that, or the other. And I just got blind to it. So
Yeah.
that's what I do. But I don't know. You had said something about that too. That's a good question for you as well, because what was it you said that then you feel like a painting is done and it's done? How do you know?
When it doesn't irritate me anymore, when I can sit and look at it, and my eye can go around it, and my eye doesn't find anything disturbing.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that that's when it feels good, and then I'm kind of ready to let it go. It's good to take time away from it before you look at it again, because I think when you're so absorbed with it, there's this tendency you can overwork it very easily if you just, because you're like, oh, but this area is more developed than that area, and I have to bring this area up to that. But oftentimes that's not how a successful composition works. You want your eye to lead around it. You want focal point. You want, you do want areas to be more developed than others, and so having uh, that balance of loose and tight and giving yourself room to breathe and then come back to it with fresh eyes when you haven't been staring at the reference or whatever or the painting for hours and hours is can be really helpful for me.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. It's for me. It sort of feels like a gear shift. It's almost like I take off one set of eyes and I put on a different set of eyes, and that sometimes that can take a couple of weeks because, as you say, when you're in it and everything is still open to being changed, there is this huge space where you just keep fiddling with it. But it's almost like as soon as I kind of go, okay, I think that's finished. I'm going to leave it alone for a while, and then when I come back, my eyes have changed, and it's like, oh yeah, that's actually way better than I thought it was
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so I've been doing a lot of studies, which I like have not been part of my practice because it's been so much about like make a painting, get it out. I'll have periods where I have time to do that, but in the last few years I have made so many studies, and the I think I have learned through making studies that I do have kind of a completion compulsion where like if it's going well, I can't just let it be like the big color blobs that it should be, and I'll be like, oh well, I'm just gonna do a little bit more work on this and a little bit more work on this, and then I have like just a small painting. That happens a lot too.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's interesting too, like changing style. I think that's been one of the most challenging things for me is I've had my paintings have come to a very tight place of completion, and to be painting so much looser, you really have to leave areas unfinished and also untouched, because if you make a beautiful brush stroke but it's not exactly the perfect value or the perfect, you have to make a decision there. You have to decide, am I going to destroy this like magnificent part of this painting by developing this piece of the painting further, or am I just going to leave this stroke here and let it live its life and be what it is, and that's
Yeah.
that's
It's
that's
such a
new for me. That's
it's
totally new
such a
for me.
fine line, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
And it's like trying to put those second set of eyes on when you're in the process of making it, because that can be such a delicious thing in a painting, something
Yes.
that evokes a kind of mystery, and almost your eyes just enjoy finishing the line. It's like that thing where people make things out of negative space, and there's something really delightful about filling it in and going, oh, that's a cat, oh, okay, I see it.
Right. Yeah.
um how do you deal with self-doubt? It's another one of
Oh
the new questions.
gosh. You just have to have the blind and stupid and ridiculous belief in yourself. And like that's truly what it is. It's no other option. Don't give yourself another option. You're always going to be able to do something else. You can always get another job. You can always support yourself in another way. You can always compare yourself to other people, but you just have to trust that the thing that brought you here is the thing that's going to kind of shepherd you through, and it doesn't really change. I think that unfortunately painting and being in a studio it's really challenging, because you're forced to sit there and do this thing, this practice that you love, that you're so dedicated to, but you're also having to sit with yourself, who's your own worst critic, for hours and hours and hours. And so it's this constant balance of having to get out of your own head. I think, having a few trusted people or people that you admire, or that you respect, that you can kind of get feedback from. A community of artists, I think, is the greatest thing for artists. And I say that because I feel like at the end of the day, we're really making paintings for each other, right? Like you can don't I mean, anytime, like when a really great artist sees something that you've done or your work and is like, that's amazing, I love that, or connects
Hmm.
to it in a way, and it goes back to that thing of us, it's this the special thing about artists is that we have the weirdness, we're weirdos just like anybody else in the world, but we have this amazing unique outlet for it. And we identify it in each other, right? We're a community, we're a group, we're a team. And so I think to compare yourself against those people is very easy. To assume that that person is looking at you with judgmental eyes is very easy. And then you internalize that and it becomes self-doubt. But in my experience, artists are just they're the fucking best. Like I've never had a city that I've gone to where there's been cities where I've gone to where there's an artist that lives there that I admire that I just absolutely don't know, or I know them on social media and I'm like, "Hey, I really love your work. Like, could I stop by your studio?" Yes, every time. Yes. Come on by. I would love to show you my work. Like, if it's another artist, if they can, that's where Instagram is great. If they can look you up in 5 minutes on Instagram and be like, oh my gosh, it's someone just like me, right? Or someone I can teach, or someone I can guide, or someone I can help, or someone amazing that I look up to. Like, I have found that other artists really want to help other artists, and we
Yes.
want to give we want to give feedback, we want to support, we want to, you know, get jobs for each other. Like that's happened to me so many times where I, you know, or I've done it, I've passed it along where I'm like, I'm not the right person for this, but I have a friend and I'll put that person in touch, you know. And if you can find a couple of people where you can be like, hey, can I show you this? Like those people are always going to say yes. Like they're always going to want to see what you're doing, and they're going to give you the encouragement that you need to get out of your own fucking head and to, you know, do the work and do it really well. So I think that finding a little bit of a community, especially in artists, it can't be, you know, because your mom is always going to tell you that your work is great. Unless it's my mom, she's very judgmental. But no,
Yeah,
I'm just kidding. She thinks everything I do is great. But you know, your friends and family are always going to support you, and they're going to think you're amazing. And those people, you know, our little artist egos need those people too, because we need to feel special and unique for what we do and what we bring to the world. But you also need your team, and you need the people who are just as special and unique as you to be the ones that really support you and to be like, hey, like this is really good, or to understand the feedback. If they're like, this is cool, you're going in the right direction, but like you should think about these things, and to have the
yeah.
opinion that you really, you know, you appreciate. And I think that is the best way to, you know, step out of yourself and find people that you trust and love to help you with the self-doubt, because it's there all the time, you know. I'm full of it right now, having not shown this new work to anybody. So it really doesn't go
Do you
away,
mean
no
full of
matter.
self doubt? Just want to clarify
Oh
that.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah.
Because what you said is I'm full of it right now.
Yeah, no, oh yeah, I'm just full of shit. Like that's it. No, no, I'm full of self-doubt right now. But I think that that's part of it, right? It doesn't really go away. And if you're challenging yourself and pushing yourself, then you should kind of have a little bit of self-doubt all the time. And so I think just uh yeah, just being able to process it, work through it. And it's one of those things that you kind of have to get used to as an artist. It's like taking criticism. You just have to, it's part of it, right? Like you can't please everybody, and people are going to say some nasty shit about you, and people are going to say no to you, and that's, you know, you got to get used to rejection too. It's part of the game, you know.
Yeah, that's a really good point you made about like thinking it through to the other side of it, meaning like because people all, you know, it's like what do I do with how do I deal with self doubt? It's like, well, just think it through to the other side. If you didn't have any self doubt, wouldn't that set off all your alarm bells? You know, like a little
Yeah.
bit is, you know, keeps you sharp, you know, and you don't want to get rid of it all. And if it all suddenly, if you're like, yep, that's it, I've arrived, this is a masterpiece, you just
Yeah,
know that's not, you know, that's not
right.
good.
What do you have to work for after that? And like the joy of being an artist is that this is this life's pursuit that we're never going to get to the end of, right? Like
Yeah.
we're going to die before we're great, right? Like before we're masters, like we just are. And so, but it's the joy of being able to, of leveling up.
Yeah.
Like
Um, so you were talking last, you know, when we last spoke about, you know, the difficulty of being a parent and being an artist. And this was before you, as you say, you had your second. So how has that evolved with you? Has it got any easier? Has it got harder?
you know, I think any parent can say like it's gotten tremendously easier and harder at the same time. Like it's, you know, kids never stop needing all of you. And it's easier because my kids are only 17 months apart. So that was really hard in the beginning. And now it's just not that hard anymore. You know, they're so close in age that they're good friends. they're kind of developmentally in the same place, which makes it really easy. You know, they can go to birthday parties together and have play dates together, and it's not dealing with two different scenarios. So I feel really lucky in that. I also have really good kids, which is, you know, there's no major challenges or drama or illness or anything like that. So and I feel just super lucky and fortunate in that they're happy, well-adjusted, good kids. And so I think that, but you know, they need you all the time, and it's you know, I think that there's a very different relationship between, um, I really hope to not offend anybody through this, but between mothers and fathers and kids, and especially with little kids, like they just need their mom all the time and in a very special and unique way. And it doesn't mean fathers are any less important, but when you have a, you know, a truly selfish, time selfish job, and you have two time selfish kids and you've committed to both, you have to find a balance, and you can't do everything, and that's always going to be hard. You know, if I wish all the time that I could paint 16 hours a day like I used to, and it just doesn't really work that way anymore. But they're both in school, which is helpful. Public school is a racket, though. I will say that they barely go to school. It's ridiculous. There's like constantly something going on. It's like there's this holiday, and now it's a teacher work week, and now it's 2 weeks of spring break, and now it's they're never in school. It's insane. So, um, so I think that that is, yeah, it's harder because it'll always be hard because they're in my life and they're my priority. And it's easier because they're a little bit older and they're self-sufficient and they're both in school and I have time. If there's anybody listening to this with a baby who is like, what the fuck did I just do? I just completely shattered my art career, especially women, like it gets so much easier and you're going to come around and it'll be fine. And so I, you know, I think that I had a lot of support in that time from other artists where I felt like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. What did I, you know, it's hard when you feel so much validation and satisfaction out of your job to sacrifice that in a lot of ways to take care of a baby. And so, but it does get a lot easier. And they're my kids are awesome. They're great. I'm really glad that I became a mother. It's dramatic and sad and happy and all the things and all of that. The drama of that experience is, I can't think of anything more inspiring for, you know, creating work or anything creative. So it's pretty great.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Um, okay, a question I've started asking people is, it's like a thought experiment, and it's you're on a desert island. There's no one else around. No one's coming. You're ever. Your shelter is taken care of, and your food is taken care of, and you've got any kind of art supplies that you want. Would you still make art that no one was ever going to see but you?
Oh yeah, that's like my fantasy, honestly.
Okay, so it's Fantasy Island. It's not Desert Island.
I mean, honestly, like if my basic necessities were taken care of and I never had to talk to another person again and I could just be alone forever and make art, like I would be perfectly happy with
Okay,
that.
so then the next question is, would it be different to what you're doing now?
Um, I mean, I doubt I would have reference if I was on the island. So I think that I would probably do a lot of, I think I would paint from
Okay,
observation.
you have
So
any kind of
yeah.
reference you want. You have any kind of
Oh,
reference you
okay.
want. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would still be my narrative. It would still be my experience. It would still be all of that stuff. You know,
Yeah.
it's funny and it just kind of, I've been letting that happen too, where I'm not thinking about things in such a linear way. And that's, I feel like the work that's developed has come together as kind of a series or a collection. but it's not, I've been doing still life pieces. I've been doing things that like I really have never done before. And through this exploration, and I think that when you do that and when you deep dive and you trust yourself, you come out the other end and there's this body of work that is cohesive and meaningful because you've connected it within yourself. And so, yeah, I would do the exact same thing that I'm doing now. And I would trust myself, and I would be grateful for the time and the space. I think that um, that's what's happened. I've been on a deserted island for the last 3 years, and it's been seriously, and it's been really it's been all of the things: hard, happy, sad, and I think that there's so much value in that. That's life. That's it. So
Yeah,
capturing that, taking the time to capture that, I think is a real privilege.
very good. What sort of price are your paintings selling for these days?
They're still, I think anywhere from the low to tens of thousands of dollars, usually between like $1,000 and $25,000, somewhere in
Okay,
there. Yeah.
depending on size.
Depending on size, yeah. And that'll also be interesting. That's where, having a guy like Richard in my corner is really helpful, is that he's helped me with a lot of that stuff, figuring out how to
Yeah,
price things, giving me advice on that. And I'll whether I send these big paintings to him or not, he'll be the guy that I ask about how I should price them. So
yeah,
um
yeah,
it's nice to have that. That's an amazing benefit of mine.
yeah. No, he's brilliant at that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, do you have a big art dream you'd like to achieve before you die?
I'd like to have a museum show. And I'd like it to not be before I die. I actually have, that's maybe one of my goals for the not so distant future, hopefully. But there's an artist friend of mine, Rachel Stiff, she's the director of the art department at a community college nearby. So we're in the same place right now. Our lives have intertwined very, very organically. She has been a huge muse of mine. I've painted her a lot. And we both ended up in Las Vegas together at the same time because we followed partners there for their jobs. And we started teaching together we taught together briefly at UNLV. The art department there at the time was an absolute disaster, and we got the hell out quick. But it was, I'm sure it's great now. No offense to UNLV art department, but the guy that was in charge was kind of a nightmare to work for. And we walked out of the first meeting kind of just like, what the hell was that? And there was no curriculum, there was nothing to follow. It was ridiculous. And we decided to build it together and work together. She is an abstract landscape painter. Her paintings are amazing, and our work has never fit together. And now that I'm painting so much looser, I really want to do a show with her. We've moved away, we've moved near each other again, and we've just always been in each other's lives. We're meant to be together in a very weird way. I love her, and she's amazing. Um and so I think that is currently one of my dreams, is doing a museum show with her landscapes and my new figures. We both have a connection to the West. We both it feels like now our work fits nicely together. And
Yeah,
so um trying to convince her of that, on the other hand, is really hard. So she's extremely busy, and she's a very, very dedicated teacher. And so I don't know, but I'm hoping that works out sometime in the future. I just, I see our work together in a museum on big white walls, and I think that it would be magnificent and a really nice milestone for us to have together. So that's kind of one of my current dreams, that I'm trying to make that happen.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, it's been lovely chatting with you again, as always. It's
Yeah.
really, it's really nice to hear, you know, about what's been going on, what you've been going through. So many artists, took the opportunity of that kind of confinement to really dig deep, do a deep dive, and come out with some fantastic stuff. And I've no doubt your new paintings are going to be great and be really well received.
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll say goodbye for now then.
Thank you so much for having me again. This was great, and it's so nice to chat with you always.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
I've never felt this good in my entire life. Make me some spaghetti.
Actually, I'd prefer a cup of tea. A cup of tea would be lovely. So, yeah, just a little reminder, mainly because every second or third person who becomes a patron has got in touch with me and said, you know what, I've been listening to your podcast for ages, and I didn't become a patron, not because I don't have the money, not because I don't think it's great, I just didn't get around to it. So this is a little friendly reminder that if you'd like to be a patron, you'd like to buy me a cup of tea, go to patreon.com/John Dalton, gently does it, all one word, or follow the link in the show notes to become a patron. I would really appreciate it if you could do that, particularly if you've been meaning to and you just haven't got around to it. It would be great. It would mean a lot to me. All right, thank you. Bye.
We are the Argyle Pimps, so buy us a drink. We're better than you thought, but not as good as we think. We are the Argyle Pimps, so buy us a drink. Come on, buy us a drink. Come on, buy us a drink. We are the Argyle Pimps, so buy us a drink. We're better than you thought, but not as good as we think. We are the Argyle